Let me tell you before I start. If you ever find yourself near the deep woods section of Virginia, take my advice and stay the hell out. Those woods aren't just quiet or eerie. There's something deeply wrong with them. I'm speaking from experience. And God, how I wish someone had warned me before I walked straight into a nightmare I'll carry with me forever. It was 2010, and I'd planned a 2-day hiking and camping trip in the George Washington National Forest, a sprawling expanse of wilderness about 150 miles west of Richmond. I'd spent countless weekends exploring these woods, knowing every ridge, stream, and clearing as if they were part of my backyard. That morning, around 7 a.m., I parked my truck at a small, unmarked trailhead roughly 10 miles off the main road. The gravel road leading there had been narrow and bumpy, surrounded by towering pines that blocked out most of the morning light. I laced up my boots and set off at a steady pace, using my trekking poles to navigate the uneven trail. The first mile was easygoing, a warm-up for the real hike ahead. I passed a small stream and paused to refill my water bottle, using a portable filter to ensure it was safe to drink. By 9:30 a.m., I'd covered about 4 miles and decided to take a short break. I set my pack down and stretched, enjoying the satisfaction of making good time. As I got moving again, I decided to leave the main trail and explore a lesser-known path I'd heard about from another hiker. It was supposed to lead to an old lookout point. The trail quickly became rougher, the terrain more challenging, but I relished the workout. By 10:30 a.m., I was navigating through underbrush, using my map and compass to keep track of my location. I stopped again to eat a granola bar, keeping my energy up as I planned the next leg of my hike deeper into the forest. But as I packed up and started walking again, something shifted. The woods grew unnervingly quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive silence that seemed to swallow every step I took. By 2 p.m., I realized I was lost. The trail I'd been following had disappeared, and no amount of backtracking seemed to help. I checked my map, my compass, but none of it made sense. It was like the forest itself had shifted, twisting the familiar paths into something unrecognizable. Frustration gave way to panic as the hours ticked by, and I found myself deeper in the woods than I'd ever been before. The towering trees seemed to close in around me, their gnarled branches casting eerie shadows in the fading light. Then around 5 p.m., I stumbled upon something that stopped me cold, an old, abandoned cabin. It sat in a small clearing, its wooden walls weathered and gray with age. The windows were shattered, and the roof sagged under the weight of time. But as I approached, something about the cabin was wrong. It didn't just look abandoned, it felt malicious. I hesitated at the doorway, but I went inside to check. In the corner of the room stood a wooden idol, about 3 feet tall. It was grotesque, hand-carved and twisted, with features that seemed almost human but horribly distorted. Its eyes were hollow. God, I don't even want to think about what they were. The air around charged with a malevolent energy that made my skin crawl. I'd never felt fear like that before. Pure, unrelenting terror. I didn't stick around to investigate. I bolted out of that cabin, but the moment I stepped outside, I realized something was very, very wrong. The daylight I'd seen just moments ago was gone, replaced by a suffocating darkness. It was as if night had fallen in an instant. My watch said it was only 5:30 p.m., but the forest was pitch black. I couldn't even see the moon or stars, just an endless void overhead. Panic took over. I ran blindly through the woods. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, there was nothing there. Still, the feeling of being watched was unbearable. I don't know how far I ran or how long I was out there. Time seemed meaningless, distorted. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but I couldn't stop. By some miracle, I stumbled onto a familiar trail around 9 p.m. I finally reached the parking lot. It was empty except for my truck. The sight of it was almost enough to bring me to tears. I jumped in, locked the doors, and didn't stop driving until I was miles away from that godforsaken forest. I don't know what that idol was or what I stumbled upon that day. I'll never go back to those woods. Whatever's out there, it's not meant to be found. So, if you ever find yourself near the deep woods of Virginia, take my advice. Stay the hell away. That happened to me in 2007. I decided to go solo camping in the remote forests of Pennsylvania. I'd had a hell of a week, dealing with my job and the constant noise of town life, so I thought a night alone in the woods would do me some good. Just me, my van, and the stars, no people, no problems. I wasn't looking to rough it or anything. I didn't even pack proper camping gear. Just my old van, a beat-up tent, and enough food to keep me fed for one night. I didn't think I'd need anything more. How stupid was I? I drove for about 2 hours from my place to a forest near a lake I'd heard about, a spot most people couldn't even point to on a map. Perfect. By the time I got there, it was around 5:30 p.m. and the sun was already starting to dip behind the treetops. I found an isolated spot off a dirt path about half a mile from the lake itself. It was quiet, peaceful, and surrounded by thick woods on all sides. The kind of place where no one would bother me. I parked the van, stretched my legs, and thought, yeah, this is it. This is what I need. After setting up a small fire pit and pulling out my camp chair, I got to work cooking dinner, a can of chili and some sausages. Real gourmet shit, I know. The smell of the food mixed with the crisp, cool air of the woods. It felt goddamn perfect. I sat there for a while, just soaking it all in, staring at the fire and listening to the sounds of the forest. By the time I finished eating and cleaned up, it was close to 9 p.m., and the temperature had dropped. The fire was starting to die out, and I figured it was time to hit the sack. I wasn't about to freeze off sitting outside all night. I climbed into my van, locked the doors, and stretched out on the mattress I'd set up in the back. I didn't even bother pitching the tent. The van was warmer and felt safer. I was out cold within minutes, my mind finally quiet for the first time in weeks. Then, at goddamn 3:17 a.m., I think, I woke up to this loud, chaotic noise outside the van. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but no. The sound was real, and it was close. My heart was immediately pounding like a drum in my chest. It was this thrashing, almost violent sound, branches snapping, something heavy moving through the underbrush, circling the van. My first thought was a bear. Hell, I hoped it was a bear, because at least that would have made sense. But something about the noise was off. It wasn't just heavy footsteps or the rustling of an animal looking for food. It sounded heavy, something like breathing and heavily stepping outside. I grabbed the only thing I had for protection, a goddamn pocket knife, and gripped it so tight my hand started cramping. The van felt suffocatingly small, like I couldn't move or breathe without whatever was out there hearing me. I wanted to peek out the windows, but my body wasn't cooperating. I just lay there, silent and still as the noise got closer. Then suddenly, it sounded like it was right next to the van, scratching or dragging something along the side. My whole body froze. The sounds went on for few minutes like hell. What if it wasn't an animal? What if it was some psycho, some killer out here? Somehow the noise finally stopped. It was almost 5 a.m., and I was too terrified to move, let alone sleep. When the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I finally worked up the courage to open the door. My legs were shaking as I stepped outside, knife still clutched in my hand. The air was freezing outside. I walked around the van, expecting to see scratches or footprints, anything to prove I wasn't losing my mind. But there was nothing. No damage, no tracks, no signs that anything had been there. It didn't make any goddamn sense. I didn't stick around to figure it out. I packed my shit in record time, threw it in the van, and got the hell out of there. I haven't been camping alone since, and I sure as hell don't go unarmed anymore. You can call me paranoid, but I don't give a damn. When you felt that kind of fear, when you've been that close to something you can't explain, it changes you. I haven't camped alone since, and I damn sure don't go anywhere without proper weapons now. The woods are beautiful, but they're not always peaceful. And sometimes, the things you can't see are the ones you should be most afraid of. When I was 14, my family decided to go camping for the first time, deep in the remote woods of the San Juan National Forest in Colorado. My parents had this grand idea to connect with nature, dragging us kids out of our comfort zone and into the middle of nowhere. To me, it sounded like an adventure. No school, no chores, just the wild and endless freedom of the forest. We arrived at the campsite after a grueling drive down 15 miles of dirt roads that felt like they'd rattled my brain loose. It was about noon when we finally parked the car, surrounded by nothing but towering pines and absolute silence. My dad got to work pitching the tent like some kind of survival expert, while my mom set up the portable grill like it was our backyard. My siblings and I didn't wait around. We ran off, climbing on rocks, chasing each other, and seeing who could find the weirdest bugs. It was hot, sticky, and honestly, a little boring once the initial excitement wore off. By the time everything was set up, I was ready for something new. That's when my aunt, the so-called adventurous one in the family, suggested we hike to a river she'd heard about. "It's only a couple of miles," she said, "just a quick walk." It sounded better than sitting around, so I grabbed my sneakers and off we went. We hit the trail around 3 p.m. with her leading the way and me following close behind. The path was rough roots, sticking out everywhere, rocks just waiting to twist an ankle, but it felt like an adventure, like we were explorers heading into the unknown. We stopped every so often to check out weird trees or bright flowers, even saw a fox dart across the trail. It was the kind of stuff you only see in postcards. When we got to the river, it was better than I expected. The water was cold and clear, rushing over smooth stones, and the sound of it was almost hypnotic. We ditched our shoes and waded in, laughing at how freezing it was. My aunt showed me how to skip rocks, and we tried catching tiny fish with our hands. Spoiler alert, they're faster than they look. It felt peaceful, like nothing bad could touch us out there. But then we decided to wander further down the riverbank. That's when things got weird. We were about 15 minutes from where we'd started, stepping over rocks and ducking under low branches, when we saw a man. At first, he just looked like some old guy out taking pictures. He was standing near the water, holding this clunky, beat-up camera that looked older than he was. His clothes were dirty, and his beard looked like it hadn't been trimmed in years. I remember thinking he seemed out of place, but nothing about him screamed danger until he turned and saw us. The way he stared, like he was sizing us up, made my skin crawl. Then I noticed the knife on his belt. It wasn't some small pocket knife. It was big, sharp, and meant for more than just carving wood. He pointed to it, then dragged his fingers slowly across his throat, like he was daring us to stick around. I froze, but my aunt didn't. She grabbed my arm so hard it hurt and hissed, "Run. Now." And we did. We bolted back up the riverbank, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The crunch of leaves and twigs under our feet mixed with the sound of his boots behind us. He was chasing us. I didn't dare look back. I didn't need to. I could feel him, like a shadow right on our heels. We tore through the trees, branches whipping at our faces and arms. At one point, I tripped over a root and nearly went down, but my aunt yanked me back up before I could hit the ground. "Keep running," she panted, her voice sharp with fear. "Don't stop." I couldn't even think. All I knew was that we had to get away. My lungs burned. My legs felt like they were about to give out, but I kept going. We broke through the trees and saw my grandmother's cabin up ahead. It was small and rickety, but to me, It looked like a fortress. We sprinted up the steps, my aunt practically dragging me inside. She slammed the door, locked it, and grabbed the shotgun my grandma kept by the fireplace. Her hands were shaking, but she aimed it at the window like she was ready to blow the guy away if he tried anything. We sat there on the floor, backs against the wall, waiting. The forest outside was deathly quiet. I kept expecting him to smash through a window or kick down the door, but he never came. We finally let ourselves breathe. The next morning, we told my parents everything and called the cops. They came out, searched the area, and found nothing. No footprints, no sign of the man like he'd vanished earlier. But I know what I saw. My aunt knows what she saw. That guy was real, and he wasn't just some lost hiker. That camping trip wasn't just my first, it was my last. That creepy bastard didn't just scare me, he stole something from me. My sense of safety, my trust in people, my childhood innocence, it was gone. For months, I couldn't sleep without the lights on. Even years later, I can't set foot in the woods without feeling that fear clawing at the back of my mind. So if you ever find yourself in the remote woods of Colorado, do yourself a favor. Stay alert, stay armed,